Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Kirk Gray.
Hey, Kirk, have you ever had to deal with a supplier on a complex issue? Let me tell you, I got this issue right now I'm dealing with. And without naming names and everything else,
you can't do that in reliability.
Well, I could, but I don't think it's relevant. So I have four different elements, and I'm quite sure there are other pieces involved, because then there's firmware and interoperability and connectedness and all that other stuff, and standards bodies and everybody else. But I have four different elements, basically four different suppliers that have parts of this system that in order for the system to work, all four elements have to work. And it's in a chain. If one element in any of these four doesn't work, then it doesn't work. It doesn't go through.
Right.
See, I'll make a real reliability and audio engineer. You understand series systems. So I jest. But the idea is that, and I knew right off the bat that I would get different responses from all four agencies, all four suppliers.
Of course.
So I sent my first request for some support to sort this thing out to the one I figured would give me the best support and answer. Mm-hmm. And they actually gave me some really good advice. And they said, hey, we need this error log from here and we need this from there. And that goes to the other groups. Mm-hmm. And one of them said, well, that's not our problem. We're not going to help you. Another one said that can't possibly happen. So we don't see there's a solution here. So then it happens to be that I knew some of their senior execs. So I wrote straight to them saying, hey, you're just not helping here. It doesn't matter whether it's your fault or not. If that group is making an error and it shows up only when it hits your system, you break the system, but it's their fault. So come on, let's work together to solve this thing. And it's taking days to coordinate these four and oversee this thing. And so I bring that up because whether I'm dealing with a ceramic capacitor or a IC or a battery pack, or I think you've talked about your bike, and the power adapter thing.
Yeah, burning up,
Burning up. And
because the proximity issue with the hot transformer. Yeah. Anyway, one of the issue, Fred, one of the challenges for a component manufacturer is he's sending out components to maybe a wide variety of industries or applications. He guarantees his specs for, performance or whatever.
Oh yeah, I get that. But I understand that. Yeah.
But and also the volume he's producing, if he's selling to Apple and
Apple only makes 10 products. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, well, maybe. But they still use chip capacitors. They still use a lot of things.
Well, I know, but if you're sending it to amp the guys that make connectors, and they make their catalog of connectors is 40,000 kinds of connectors.
Right.
You don't know where this metallization of this one part is going, or this polymer is going. Yeah, I get that.
Right.
But the issue is not that I'm not blaming them that they did anything wrong. I'm not saying all the four of you I'm just trying to, hey, I have this problem.
Yes.
It could come from any one of you guys, but more likely it comes from an interaction among the four of you. And I need information from each of you in order to debug this. And that's what I was really asking, knowing the issue that if I go, hey, it's not working, you fix it. Their easiest answer is, well, it's not our problem. We meet our specs. Right. And no, wait a sec. That's not what I'm asking you for. And it pissed me off because the very first response I got from a couple of them was, hey, it's not our problem.
Well,
how do you know that?
Well, they don't. Who is the person, the integrator, the system integrator?
Me at this point. I'm the one that said, I want these four elements to go together on paper. And up until Friday, of course, it's Friday.
It worked on paper, right?
No, it worked on paper up until Friday. And for years, this process has worked. This system that I've been kludging together has worked just fine.
Okay.
All right. something somewhere changed. And I can't see it. And I don't have access to all of the details of where it's a computer's elements and all software, but I don't have the elements to see where the error logs are. I don't have access to a lot of this stuff.
Right.
And so I'm asking them to, on your server, can I see the PHP error log? And they go,
yes.
Well, these things are done on somebody else. We don't have anything to do with that. So we're not going to get that for you.
Right. Right.
It take you less time to give me the log than it would be to tell me you can't.
Well, yeah, but they don't know if they issue it to you, well, there's many reasons a supplier, he may have changed something in the product that he doesn't want to know, that was made it cheaper or less expensive to produce or manufacture, that he doesn't want to know because it still meets the specs that he's published, that he said, okay. So he doesn't necessarily want to be blamed, especially if this is being supplied to a lot of different companies, like a power supply, for instance. And one of them has a problem with it. He's willing to say, he's certainly
at some point saying, all right, well, it's your problem.
Liability. He doesn't want to take liability for it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even want to get close to that question. And so also, there's a lot of non-disclosure agreements because they want to make sure that their information is not shared with another company that may share. It's all very quiet and private. Also, he doesn't want to be blamed for causing your problems. He doesn't want to be, even though it may not be something, it may be something that, because it's integrated into your system and there was a input that was left off or floating, ground. Who knows how it was that you had the error, or problem. They're really reluctant. Everybody's reluctant to take responsibility, and liability is such an issue. So, I can understand. It's always the defensive. We didn't do anything wrong. Our product meets the spec. Maybe the margin in the spec is reduced quite a bit.
Yeah, but
we don't care.
We don't test it over there, so we don't know. We don't look.
It worked at 35C, and that's what 40C. That's what our spec is.
Yeah.
If it fails at 45, well, I'm sorry.
That's not our problem. Check your thermocouples. What was the other one I always got? It was when I was at HP. I've told this story a couple of times. We sent one of the divisions sent some parts off to their supplier, and I gave them a call. And it was the day it got shipped, so we didn't have 2-hour delivery. It was, I think, FedExed off to him. Who knows when it'd show up? And he said, "Oh, it's ESD. It always is." And I said, "You didn't even got the part yet." And I said, ESD damage on these components is really hard to find. And he goes, "Well, we're just going to assume it is because it always is." And he says, "How do you know that?" "Well, we always assume it is."
Yeah, it's either, they also say electrical overstress, EOS, and that's a very typical. And to be fair, on their part, they don't know why it was that chip, dielectric was punched through, because they don't know the event.
That's the hard part, though. Unless it's really big hole in the middle of it.
Yeah,
it is really hard to find those. So,
if it takes a lot of money.
It takes a lot of money. So if you take a part and you look at it and there's nothing visibly wrong with it, and electrically it's just dead, right? The easiest thing to do is assume that it's something that's really hard to find and sounds plausible, and send it back to the supplier. So that was what standard answer. And then so there was, we've never seen this before. It must be your fault. That's my favorite.
Right. But unless you can examine their manufacturing process or compare their, original design that they or whatever they put
doing, or their call center logs,
and compare it with their like I say, that you don't know if that's true or not. And again, one time I had a Varactor, a little tiny diode, and instead of sending it back to the manufacturer, which I had was Toshiba, which, produces billions and billions of those all over the place to every kind of industry. They weren't going to do crap about it because this little tiny company didn't buy anything significant as a market. So I had a failure analysis lab do a cross-section and do a SEM examination of it. And it was the fact that the gold wires had exploded into the encapsulant, had actually evaporated into the encapsulant channels, but the die itself, the PN junction of diode, was still not damaged. So if there was, since it was a voltage device and not a current device, if there's any voltage getting to that, it would operate. But it was just a chain of molecules of gold.
It was flash along the inside of the insulator. Yeah,
exactly. It was easy to see that was any expansion contraction that was going to open, and that's what it did. I put them in. I put a bunch of non-failed components into the chamber from that lot, and just thermally cycled them. I didn't even really do a halt test.
Yeah.
I just do some fairly high levels of thermal cycling that I knew for safe for those individual components. Took them out, and
probably half it failed.
It was a voltage control oscillator. It's a very tiny device, had 14 components in it, and half of them failed.
Yeah. No, but if you even send that data back to the vendor with pictures,
right?
They're going to go, oh, why did you put it in the thermal cycling? That's outside the spec.
Well, if I showed them the pictures and they saw the gold and plated on the encapsulant channel for the wire, they would understand, but they would never be able to say where. Maybe in their testing, they do some cursory test on this long tape of diodes or something that a voltage spike hit it in. And a bizarre thing was the explanation of the company that I was working for at the time was that a lightning storm during the period of those being assembled traveled through the whole building system through a very sensitive oscilloscope and measurement system and got to the chip and blew that wire up. That was this bizarre.
That was the theory. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Yeah. No, and I've heard some great ones. But the idea is that, and some suppliers are great. They'll say, all right, we need to get this in the equivalent of an 8D system. So what are the symptoms? What are you actually seeing? Can you replicate it? Can you do this? Can you do that? Where does it work here? Works there. Let's do a fishbone diagram, figure out what all the potentials are. Let's start eliminating them,
and try to replicate it.
Right.
See if you can get it in a chamber and
so
do enough stress, show the same mechanism.
So one of the 4 is on that track, but it requires the other 3 actually participate. And getting through to them that, hey, we're trying to solve a complex problem that is more than likely an interaction among these two or more of these elements that make up the system. Just because it's not within your walls doesn't mean you can't contribute to that to solve the problem. And so I'm writing up just before we got started recording today, I was writing up a response to one of them that didn't want to participate. Here's what I see. Here's the symptoms. Here's where here's what I got from these other 8 groups in this that I'm working with on this. Here's what I need from you. Here's some possible solutions. Number 1, drop you from the system and never pay another dime to you and talk bad about you on Yelp, or whatever. And I thought, no, I better not write that first.
No.
But it's basically design you out of the system, because or I can do a add-on or a modifier to your system, and I use that only within my system. But I have to understand, are you seeing this signal, and how does your system respond to that system? And that's in your logs. I need access to those logs. And they're like, oh, we can't give that to you. That's not our problem. I don't care if they send us the wrong thing, that's not our problem. This is a theory that we're trying to experiment, and so it was.
Well, you're asking. Okay, it's just like, okay, I worked for the big, computer company that used Microsoft and made the
batteries burn up in laptops and airports.
Well,
and stuff like that,
no, I don't know.
Yeah, I saw the video of that, and then he also burned down a guy's new truck with his laptop in the passenger seat. I saw the video of that too.
It wasn't the only company that had laptops caught on fire.
Well, I never watched the ones that had our products in it. I was working at the other big computer company.
Yeah, I know, the ink company. Anyway, the problem, like for instance, Microsoft, they make software and distributed operating systems to all kinds of different manufacturers, from ASUS to,
even white box
L,
generic stuff, you know.
Hewlett Packard, to everybody. Okay. And so they get a call from, say, HP and says, we're having a problem with this function with your software, and we wondered if we could get to the source code and see if we can adjust something on it and see if it'll work fix this problem.
Right.
And they said, well, look, Dell and ASUS.
You're the
and
only one
Acer,
having this problem, so it must be your
right.
fault. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I get that all the time.
You're asking them to make an expense for a problem that could be yours.
Well,
in fact,
but the response, the appropriate approach to that is saying, hey, we're trying to make this product more robust so that it helps all of your customers. Is one way I've used
customers.
No, all of Microsoft customers. Yeah. We might have found a bug. We might have found an issue or something like that. We may well be the first one to come to you with this thing. Now, you can wait 6 months and get way behind on this, or we can work together and solve it, and you own the solution. You can share that with everybody else. That's one way to approach it, rather than saying, hey, we think you guys screwed up and we need to fix that. You
can try and get them to be concerned like that if they've done it. But if this is a problem that you've you're developing a new model,
but you don't know at the very onset. You never know. Is this isolated to just me, or is it with everybody? Now,
don't.
Now, one company I worked with years ago, they made HVAC systems, and it was kind of the hangs on the outside of the wall. Right. One of the models I was working with them on is the big model that hangs outside a wall for like these temporary buildings. You see them at construction sites, or like the portables, they call them, at schools.
Yeah.
Right. They'll stick one of these HVAC systems on one of those kind of buildings.
Right.
And they had an amazing customer service center. It was warehouse size, and it had all these different configurations, and they even had a system where they could mock up like the size of the room that it was working on. So these portable, they had like 4 of these units that were like portable classroom size with insulation and everything else on them, and one of their units, they had a way to quick attach these units. So if it was a different unit than the one the customer was talking about, they get a forklift over and go stick another one on it and start sensoring it all up. And they didn't look like they spared any expense to try to replicate issues from even one call. And I pushed them on it. I says, how many calls does it take before you go spend a week trying to solve it? And goes, oh, every call. It could be just a hint that there's something wrong, and here's the symptom they're seeing. We're going to go sort it out, because it's a software-driven system. We've got firmware in there. We've got all these different, mechanical elements in here. We got all this stuff, and it takes this kind of effort to sort out how can we replicate this? Because if we can't replicate it, then we can't solve it.
Right.
And he said, the question, and I wish I would have asked it when I was there, and what makes me think now, so how many of these problems did you find that weren't your design problem, weren't your, it was something else? It goes, oh, I'm quite sure he would have said it would have been some of them. But in my mind, a company, and I've run into a few of them that will actually go to that level of saying, hey, we'll work with you to solve this problem so that you have a working system. Even though it's a problem that's with somebody else's element of this process. Right. But if you become a happy customer, you keep buying our system, kind of thing. And if we can help vendor XYZ over there actually solve this problem, we all win. And I don't know why that's not more prevalent. That's my big issue.
But and so many factors are involved in that motivation by that company, that you're the supplier, that to do that, such as what percentage of you are there of your business are you? Second, is this a new technology they're just learning about and sending to the field to find out the applications and get feedback from the OEM, the integrator and system builder? And there's just, and you're right. I mean, well, you've seen it, a huge difference in companies and their willingness to help you, and how long they've been doing, producing this product. Like, Microsoft, it's been producing and making change and building operating systems for decades now. And, what percentage of their businesses are you? And they may ask, I don't know, how well they worked with the teams at Dell.
Well, I know at HP that was pretty close. I mean,
it was pretty close.
Well before they go to beta, they're working with the major suppliers.
Dell was huge volume. I mean, they were huge.
But that wasn't always in my experience in working at corporate reliability, is that the suppliers didn't ask that question. And I ran into it as a consultant too. And it was basically saying, if the company is going to say, I mean, the difference is, and I agree with you that some companies do this, is that some companies go, is this even worth our effort
it's
to go think about it? It's going to cost us some money and do all this. But that's, you and I both know that if you invest in that process of finding and solving problems, the phone's not going to call next week. You're not going to get complaints on that issue again once you put it to bed. If you're not in that process of continuous improvement and using your customers' feedback as a input into that improvement process, I think you're wasting a valuable resource. And that's just me, maybe. But I've run into enough companies that actually get it. And in that approach of, any hint of a problem, even though our product meets all of its specs, we have no trouble found, and you've ran into it, we've talked about it. Yeah. Even if you got no trouble found, if the customer is complaining, you're going to lose a customer and the 5 they take with them. So, so let's understand the problem, because it may well be that you just designed the wrong part. You designed the wrong product and you sold the wrong product. To solve that person's problem. Maybe the problem is really in marketing. It's not in engineering. My wife picked up a product the other day that, all over the packaging was very clear that it was for cleaning floors. She gets it and it goes, not to be used on floors, and the fine print underneath it, not to be used on wood floors. And they're like,
not to be used on a certain kind of floor.
Yeah. And it was, it was a wet, dry mop kind of thing. And they have like 6 models and all the packaging shows it on a hardwood floor. But only one of the 6 actually is used for hardwood floors.
Yeah, false advertising, right?
But it wasn't, whatever.
Or misleading.
Misleading. And it's like the product itself was just perfectly fine. There was nothing broken or anything else. But she called him up and says, hey, I don't understand your marketing or understand how to pick the right one. And you sent me the wrong one. And I open it up and in the inside, it has a tag on it and say, don't use it on hardwood floors. Where do you tell anybody this?
Yeah, exactly. That's in the fine print. It's again, read the fine print.
Yeah,
yeah. That's a problem. Is believing and.
But if you think of it as just an engineering problem, and it really is a sales problem, or it's a marketing problem, or an expectation problem, it's the wrong color for this particular thing, or it's whatever.
Yeah.
Then it's still a problem,
It is still a problem. And they're right. There could be quality problems that aren't necessarily failure of, the system to work or whatever, but it just wasn't the right color. Those kinds of things. Yeah, that's a problem. You've got a problem.
But the issue is that some companies, when they get a call or they get a product back, well, it meets spec, it works. What's the problem?
Well, yeah.
And they ignore that why do I have this back? They ignore that phenomena right off the bat.
Right. And they can say, well, it's worked for 5 years in X, Y, and Z companies. And so you're wanting us to go and investigate why your system has a problem with this? That's going to cost us a lot of money and time. And we haven't had any particular issues with this particular power supply or this particular component or this particular,
That's widget. Because everybody's given up calling you because you deny that the problems exist.
Or they've designed around the weakness. You know, they
somebody
designed
else
around.
Well, maybe I should have called Dell when I had problems with Microsoft. Maybe you guys would have sorted it out, and I would have got the inside scoop.
Well, they usually sometimes they've actually made hardware changes for a software problem,
and then patent it and then hide it or trade secret it or whatever. Yeah,
right.
But anyway, dealing with suppliers, as a consumer or as an integrator or a designer or as a company, there's good days and there's bad days. That's probably the safest thing to say.
there's good suppliers and there's bad suppliers. And also another factor, Fred, I don't think you brought up, is how many particular vendors do you have to choose? If you have a wide variety and they're, highly competitive industry, they'll do something. But if it's like
you're locked into one proprietary solution. Like
pinball machine manufacturers, there's one that owns 96% of the market. Is he really going to worry about a few complaints from the field when he has 96% of the market?
Well, I wonder though. I wonder if they got to that level because they paid attention to every complaint. So that's probably a subject for a whole nother podcast. Is how do you build that capability? But anyway,
okay.
We'll
probably have some podcasts ahead of us, don't we?
We do. Yeah. And I'd love to hear, what you're listening to this one. As you know, I always try to wrap it up with Kirk. Sometimes it's difficult.
I'll be quiet.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirk. If you're listening to this and you want Kirk to keep talking about something, let us know. What's the topic? What's the question you have? How have you dealt with suppliers? What kind of stories do you have with that? Or whatever else is on your mind. We are always looking for topics, especially from the audience. I didn't get any this week, so we kind of went back to this one, which was on my mind. So I asked myself how to solve this one. But anyway, we'd love to hear from you. What questions or topics or ideas you have for future episodes. And you can let us know through accendoreliability.com/go/SOR, or you can find Kirk or I or the other hosts of the show. Is it Kirk and me or Kirk and I? Anyway, it's not a show on the grammar.
I are an engineer. I don't know.
We're on LinkedIn as long as the other hosts are too. You can find us there or in our about pages on Ascendo. Lots of ways for you to get in touch. And we certainly do look forward to hearing from you.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.